Hello and welcome to the MuniFinanceGuy podcast. I'm Mark Moses, MuniFinanceGuy, and today I want to examine the trend of wealthy individuals and corporations that are fleeing from cities, states, and countries with aggressive tax policies and go a little bit beyond what's covered in typical news coverage. To just recap or review what we've seen over the last several months is in California, tax and unfriendly business policies have pushed out companies like Tesla, Oracle, Chevron, and X. Yet the state knows that it needs these companies so they can hit them up for revenues to cover what I characterize as their own self-inflicted fiscal crises. And if you try to leave places like California and New York City, you're subject to residency audits that are not just simple tax reviews, they're full investigations where auditors will track your cell phone usage, your credit card swipes, even in some cases digging through your veterinary bills just to see where your pets are living, all to build a case that you're still a resident. And that's in the States. In Norway, we've got an example of when their government hiked the wealth and dividend taxes, the response was almost immediate. In the first year after taxes passed, more than 30 billionaires and multimillionaires left the country, which is more than the previous 13 years combined. And so we're talking about 600 billion kroner or 65 billion US dollars walking out the door, leaving a big hole in their treasury. And then there's similar stories with millionaires leaving the UK. So it's become clear that whether you're a CEO in San Francisco, a resident of New York, or a billionaire in Oslo, the state sees you as a target for your wealth. And then when people do escape, we witness the indignity of the governor of New York essentially begging high net worth people to return from Florida for the sake of the state of New York and its financial position. So the media frames this as if these companies are just making business decisions or individuals are making financial decisions in kind of a standard way, the same way when a company looks at its cost structure or an individual looks at their own personal balance sheet. But I think that framing really misses a point. We're seeing really a frantic, somewhat disorganized flight from a system that has stopped protecting its citizens and started hunting them down. And this really should be a moral revolt, but because the people being hunted are not really defending themselves on moral grounds, they're really losing the war and, in effect, trying to negotiate with their captors. We live in a culture where the producers are told they need to give back. This phrase is being weaponized by the tax authorities to imply that your wealth belongs effectively to the state as the determiner of how your wealth should be divvied up. But the government's only real job, its only real purpose is to protect your rights. So as the state is now viewing productive people as nothing more than fuel for its own desperate bureaucratic machine, I'm going to dig in and examine the dynamics of this extraction. And we're going to ask one foundational question that no one really asks, and that's, by what right does a city, state, or county turn on its most productive citizens? When we think about the exodus as just a business decision or personal decision, we miss the real essence of what's going on here. And that's the inversion of the state's purpose. I've talked about this before, where the state, the government, is set up as a means to the ends of its constituency. It's to protect their rights so that they can flourish. And we've seen a reversal of that equation where the state starts to grow with expanded, vague kind of mission that just expands its reach more and more. And then the residents, the citizens, the businesses become fodder become the means to the ends, the financial ends and operational ends of the bureaucracy. And so what we have here with the wealthy individuals and companies is really a manifestation of that, with really now no holds barred. So the state is pivoted, fully pivoted. It's no longer protecting, it's predating. It's not seeing you as a citizen with rights to be secured. It's seeing you as an asset to be harvested. And so, how did this get so desperate? Well, I go back to what we've seen over the last many decades is the growing reach of government, the growing expansion, because governments at the local, state, and national level refuse to really examine their purpose and scope of activity. And they've adopted vague missions when they haven't adopted aggressive missions that trap them in a systemic scope creep, systemic expansion, and they're unwilling to confront that. And most of these agencies are unwilling to confront the entrenched cronyism, and whether it's from the special interest groups that lobby them, including the public sector unions who keep the service delivery methods anchored in the past century, if they're not willing to question what they do, they're not willing to question how they do it, then it's just a matter of time before they get financially desperate. And that's what we're seeing everywhere from California to New York to Norway and the UK. So why are the people who are fleeing, why are they on the defensive? Why are they on the run? They accept the predator's language. They'll say, oh, I'm happy to pay my fair share, without any real thinking about what they already pay and the fact that this is in effect hostage bargaining. It's validating the state's claim on their success. And so they give a utility type defense. They talk about how they create jobs, they pay a lot in taxes, they fund activities that are needed by the community. But that claim doesn't help them assert their right to control the wealth that they rightfully earn. And so in effect, they're volunteering to become a public utility, something that is available to be plucked, to be used at the will of the state, whatever level the state happens to be. There's an extreme case of this in Richmond, California, where Chevron provides about almost a quarter of Richmond's general fund. And then on one hand, the city vilifies Chevron because it earns its money primarily through fossil fuels, but then it depends on its tax base and looks for new ways to increase the shakedown. And so they rolled out a polluter's pay initiative on the ballot, which was basically a $1 per barrel oil tax. And Chevron wound up paying over $500 million settlement just to make this lawsuit ballot threat go away. And so the city used its cash to cover some of its liabilities. And so that kind of pattern is never ending. They didn't protect the company, they didn't serve the company. They basically used the threat of destruction to force a financial payout. When you look at a city like Richmond using its regulatory power to shake down a company like Chevron, to really paper over its own structural deficits, you're looking at the end game of a highly predatory state. And there's no easy walking back from this, because no one's challenging, again, the state to look at what it's taken on or look at how it's doing it. It's the cronyism, the entrenched interests are locked into sustaining this, and there's not a big movement against it. And I don't think there's going to be an effective movement against it until the people who are affected by these, and it's not just the billionaires and wealthy who are affected, it's the ambitious, it's the wannabe millionaires and billionaires. or the wannabe startups and successful companies who need to be in an environment where they're protected, not where they're plundered. And so if we want to stop the plunder, we really have to stop the negotiating and stop arguing for fairness and start arguing for rights. The current wealth exodus is a start. It's a certain kind of voting with one's feet. But until that flight is accompanied by an unapologetic moral rejection of the state's right to pillage, then the predation will continue to chase them wherever they'll go. I've seen the state of California where people leave the state and it continues to bill them, it continues to harass them, it continues to look for any way to keep its hands on or fingers in their bank account. So again, it's time for a principled defense of property. We must demand that our local governments, state governments, national governments return to their defined scope, which is the protection of individual liberty and private property. Thanks for listening. I'm Mark Moses. You can find more insights and framework evaluations at MuniFinanceGuy.com. Until next time, stay principled. Thank you.